Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Fantasy Baseball. I'm JANKOWSKI, and I am joined by my co-host, Patrick Fitzgerald. In this episode, we're going to go over the latest news and notes around baseball, recap the hitter and pitcher performances from this past week, and, of course, we give some streamer recommendations at the end of the show. But before we get started, Patrick, how are you doing, and how are your Orioles doing?
It's no secret. They are doing terribly. It's a complete dumpster fire, and there's not a lot of urgency to change it, it seems like. So we're on our way to a lost season, unfortunately. It's kind of the way it's trending, which, I like to think of myself as a more optimistic Orioles fan because we've been through a lot worse, but it's pretty disappointing. There's no two ways around it.
Yeah, you did survive, was it two straight 100-loss seasons, right? So,
Yeah, we've been through some dark times. I mean, they had 15, I don't remember. I think it's 15 years. It might be even more straight losing seasons for that was pretty much like my childhood. So, we've been through it, but when the expectations are high and you fall low, it definitely hurts a little bit more.
yeah, it's a little unfortunate. Of course, the Twins went to Baltimore this week and swept you guys in somewhat of, especially during the doubleheader day, which was Wednesday, I believe.
Mhm.
It looked like the Orioles were in it for most of the games for both of them, and yet somehow, you know, just didn't have enough to get it across and get a win there.
Yeah, Twins just were a little better getting the timely hits, and I think the season series is done now, right? They played the last 2 weeks, and the Twins won all six, and I believe their bullpen threw like 22 and two-thirds scoreless innings against the Orioles. So I
Yeah.
know the Twins got a good bullpen, but like, come on, that's just bad on the Orioles' part.
Yeah, especially considering that like it was 22 innings is because the starters just didn't go that deep in either of the doubleheader games. So it felt like after Cedric Mullins hit that grand slam in the
Yeah.
second game, I was like, well, that might be the end of the winning streak. But no, apparently Cody Clemens had something to say about it and hit a homer, I think, in the eighth inning. But that's enough about our two teams. Of course, the Twins are on an 11-game winning streak, so that's a little bit fun for us. Um, but yeah, let's get into fantasy baseball and talk about the week. But
Yeah.
yeah, just before we get into it, just a reminder: you can follow our podcast on Twitter, This Week PL. You could send us your fantasy baseball questions to our email, thisweekplpod@gmail.com. And lastly, make sure you subscribe to or follow the podcast on whatever streaming platform you listen to. Again, we're on all of them: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Wherever else you listen to your podcast, make sure you follow us and leave a 5-star review if you enjoy listening to the show. We are going to get into the injury news, and boy, there is a lot of it again, and some really big names hitting the injury list. But we're going to start with Travis Jankowski of the Tampa Bay Rays, going on the 10-day IL with a left groin strain. Kind of the notable thing about this is the corresponding move is that Josh Lowe was activated today. He hit leadoff, so just starting pretty much right where he left off, and he went 3 for 5 with a homer. So Josh Lowe looking real healthy, and unfortunately, that does mean that it was because Jankowski had to hit the injured list. Roki Sasaki is going on the 15 DIL with shoulder discomfort. He's going to be shut down from throwing for a while. Kind of unfortunate for Sasaki. Had a lot of promise coming into the season. Didn't really live up to expectations, to be honest, but was showing some signs of life in the past couple starts. But it sounds like he was basically pitching through shoulder discomfort, and then the Dodgers decided, yeah, we're just going to shut you down. So, any thoughts on Sasaki? Kind of how his season has gone, and you know, with shoulder injuries, you just never love to see it. At least it's discomfort, and they're saying that he's not going to require any sort of treatment, any sort of injections to fix it. They just want him to rest. But yeah, just any thoughts on how kind of his first 2 months in the majors has gone?
Yeah, I mean, there's really no two ways around it, but it's been incredibly disappointing. I guess the ERA is okay, right? He's been able to survive, but the whiffs haven't really been there, especially on the fastball. I think he has one of the worst fastballs in the league in terms of whiffs. So he's really kind of like a one pitch guy. He's just super reliant on the splitter. And that can only take you so far, in the best baseball league in the world. Obviously Japan is super competitive, but it is a step up coming over here. Not to mention, just a big life adjustment. So he's young, right? He's talented. I think that, this is going to be kind of a growing pains season for him. I wasn't really in on him just because I knew how high the hype was going to be. And I did see some stuff in spring training about how poorly the fastball could potentially play. But I wouldn't have even expected, this much struggle from him.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. You could maybe point to the fact that like Yamamoto also last year didn't have like the greatest season, had some injury issues, and this year he's come on the scene as a top 20 pitcher for some moments of the season. Sasaki just doesn't necessarily have the talent that Yamamoto has, so it's kind of unclear whether he's going to be able to kind of make the same leap that he made in his second season. But I think just giving some more time to just gel with the team, be more comfortable in the U.S. is only a good thing. It's unfortunate he has to do it while he's on the injured list, but it does give the Dodgers a little bit of an option to bring up Clayton Kershaw, who will be making his season debut on Saturday.
Yeah, they're going with a 6-man rotation, but seem to never have 6 healthy starters. So it's kind of just a constant revolving door.
Yeah, exactly. It's the classic Dodgers have the best injured list rotation in the league.
Yeah.
Jose Quintana of the Brewers is going on a 15 DIL with left shoulder impingement. Tobias Myers was called up as the corresponding move, but also Logan Henderson, who we've kind of mentioned the past couple of weeks, is also up in the majors. Kind of a big development here is also that Brandon Woodruff is dealing with some right ankle tendonitis, which is a different injury than what he's coming back from, of course, coming back from shoulder injury. So with both Jose Quintana hitting the shelf and with Brandon Woodruff not coming back from the injured list, it looks like both Tobias Myers and Logan Henderson are going to be staying with the major league team for a bit. Obviously, we've talked about Myers a little bit here and there. He's kind of a okay guy. He did come up for a start. I think was set down to AAA. Logan Henderson's a little bit more interesting. Just kind of he did have a solid start against Cleveland when he got called up. 5.5 innings, 2 earned runs, 7 strikeouts. Just any thoughts on picking him up? Where does he fit in a fantasy context?
Yeah, I mean, deeper formats, I think he's a must roster. He's shown a lot of swing and miss stuff, and he was really good in AAA too. All the everything you want to see was there in terms of strikeouts minus walks, ratios, all that stuff. And the Brewers, they know how to get the most out of their pitchers. So I think that he's a deeper league must roster. And then in 12 teamers, I would say check the upcoming matchups. But if you have a pitcher you've been waiting to cut and you're looking for someone who has a little bit more upside, I think Henderson's a great target. Something that I remember Nick talking about recently is that Milwaukee has actually really good strikeout numbers for park factors. So pitchers there kind of strike out guys maybe like 10% more than the league average. So that's gonna only help him in his home starts.
Yeah, that's a super interesting thing that like home park factors for strikeouts. You don't
Yeah, I don't know
don't
if
really
there's
think
like a
about that.
bad batter's eye or I don't know what the deal is, but it's not as bad as like Seattle or something like that. But it is pretty above average.
Sure. All right, Bryce Miller of the Mariners is hitting the 15 DIL with right shoulder inflammation, which is kind of a big deal because it means that Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, and Bryce Miller are all on the injured list. Thankfully for the Mariners, their schedule is kind of set up in a way where they actually don't need 5 men in the rotation for, I think, a week or so. Just with the way the schedules is. Right now, basically, their lineup is Brian Wu, Luis Castillo, Logan Evans, and Emerson Hancock. And the 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 people who could kind of be called up from AAA are not guys that are promising in any sort of way. So, really unfortunate injury for Seattle, but it does sound like Kirby is making his final rehab start tomorrow on Friday. Logan Gilbert has pitched a bullpen session, so he'll probably need to go on a rehab assignment before coming back. But yeah, it looks like at least they're probably getting reinforcements in time for when their schedule picks back up, and they'll need that fifth starter.
Yeah, who would have thought that Gilbert Miller and Kirby would go down before Brian Wu, right? He was the one we were all worried about. That just shows how hard it is to predict pitcher injuries.
Yeah, and of course the Mariners are at the top of the AL West as well, so clearly like pitching just doesn't matter. Oswaldo Cabrera of the Yankees going on the 10-day AL with a fractured left ankle. A little bit of an unfortunate injury there. He was kind of hustling home on, I believe it was a sac fly, and just had a non-contact injury, and just kind of crumbled at the plate. So unfortunate for him. It does mean that DJ LeMahieu is getting called up, or not called up is probably the wrong term. They're activated from the 10-day AL. And probably will try to help fill the void that Cabrera left there. Tanner Houck of the Red Sox going on the 15-day IL with a right flexor pronator strain. Just more injury issues for the Red Sox pitching staff, unfortunately. Corey Seager of the Rangers going back on the 10-day IL after re-aggravating his hamstring. He had actually a pretty nice day. I think it was like a 2-homer day or something like that, and then got hurt again. So unfortunate for Corey Seager. Just one of the best baseball players when he's healthy, but just has not been able to shake the injury bug for the last couple seasons.
Mhm.
Ian Happ of the Cubs going on the 10-day IL with a left oblique strain. Kind of unfortunate there, of course. Never love to see an oblique strain. Craig Counsell had an interesting comment saying that Happ is going to bat leadoff as soon as he returns from injury, but with obliques, it's just kind of unsure when that's going to be. So they say it's mild. We'll see how long he stays on the injured list. Dane Myers of the Marlins going on the 10-day IL with a right oblique strain, and Ben Lively of the Cleveland Guardians going the 15-day IL with a right flexor strain. He had some nice outings here and there throughout the season. Nothing really amazing to talk about there, but just another hit to that Cleveland rotation, which was already a little bit thin with some of the injuries that they had been dealing with. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Things are piling up a little bit. I think for my teams, like the last few weeks, I feel like I've been pretty lucky with injuries. And then this week, it's like one team, I got all these guys coming back. Like I got Weathers and Kirby coming back, and I'm super excited about that. And then in this other league, I had Bryce Miller, Ian Happ, and Corey Seager all hit the IL when I already had Yordan Alvarez and Mike Trout on the IL. So it's like, sometimes you're high and sometimes you're low. And that's definitely what I've been dealing with this week.
Yeah, it's a challenge of how do you navigate the waiver wire to like replace guys of this type of talent, right? Like you're just not going to find another Corey Seager on the waiver wire. So, what do you do to deal with that? Yeah, I
Right,
was.
and I added Tovar because someone dropped him, and I was hoping he'd come back. And it's like he's rehabbing, but he's not back yet. So I've been playing the whole week without a first baseman shortstop because apparently Yandy Diaz can't travel to Canada. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just visa issues. It was, of course, he goes on the, I believe it's the inactive list. I forget what the
the restricted list, yeah.
restricted list. Yeah, but he can't go to Canada, and so
hmm
everyone was like, "Oh no, is there a suspension coming?" No, his visa just is not the right one.
Yeah, I guess it was the best case scenario.
Very true. Yeah, exactly. He only misses like three games.
hmm
All right, in terms of some good news, people that are returning from the injury list, Spencer Strider of Atlanta is coming back. He's going to return against the Nationals next week. The organization hasn't said exactly which game he's coming back to pitch, but he is returning next week. That at least is sure. Uh, Ryan Weathers, as we mentioned, activated on Wednesday, went 5 innings with 5 strikeouts, 76 pitches. I've asked this question in the last 2 weeks, but now that we actually have a start from Ryan Weathers, is he a guy that you think should be picked up in 12 teamers?
Yeah, I think he's a must roster. He has to face the Cubs again next week, and he just pitched against them, which isn't ideal because they're a good lineup. But clearly, he can be successful against them. But yeah, he showcased the stuff spike that we saw from him in spring training. It came right back in his season debut, which was great to see. Sitting like 97 on the fastball, topping out 99. He's a guy who needs to throw hard because he has really bad extension. But it seems like the velocity it's gonna be pretty impactful. I mean, from the left side, that's got to make him one of the hardest throwing left-handed starting pitchers in the league. And he looks good. He is a guy who struggles a little bit with command and control sometimes, but I think he's a must add. Gets a little bit of a downgrade in wins leagues just because he's on the Marlins, but I think he's still worth having.
Yeah, I think the main thing to monitor is just where's that velocity at. But if it stays at 97, right, is where he's at right
Yeah.
now. Yeah, he's definitely he's going to be a really good addition to most fantasy teams. Isaiah Kiner Falefa, kind of a small thing here. He got activated, then the IL is playing shortstop for Pittsburgh. Looks like he's going to be locked into their starting lineup for a while. Kyle Higashioka was activated from the 10 IL. He doesn't really have a lot of value, I think, in fantasy, considering he's a second catcher in Texas. But if you're looking for a guy to maybe stream, and he does get consistent at bats, he DH'd on Tuesday, and he started in the lineup on Wednesday. So he at least Rangers actually try to get his bat in the lineup just a little bit. Kendall Graveman of the Diamondbacks activated from the 15th DAL. The only thing notable about this is he's generally been a high leverage reliever most of his career, and with the lack of depth in Arizona right now, he could be a nice holds pickup or maybe even sneak a save here or there as they wait for Justin Martinez and AJ Puck to return from the injured list. And we mentioned this last week already, but Zach Eflin of the Orioles finally returned on Sunday. I think he had a pretty decent start. I know I had him in one of my fantasy teams. I don't remember the exact line, but I remember looking at it and not being too disappointed with it.
Yeah, I think he went 5 innings, 2 runs. I can't remember if he got the win or not, but he wasn't. He only had one rehab start, so he wasn't fully built up. But he should be. He should be kind of all systems go for his next one.
Yeah. All right. Some more injury updates. As we mentioned, George Kirby is going to make his final rehab start on Friday. So likely he's coming back next week. Logan Gilbert threw a 25 pitch bullpen session on Tuesday, so he's probably on track to start a rehab assignment soon. Yordan Alvarez is eligible to return from the injured list. The Astros has said he's close to returning, but no timetable yet on when that actually is happening. Ezequiel Tovar of the Rockies has played multiple rehab games in AAA, so he should be coming up soon, but as we just kind of discussed, we're not sure when that's happening. Byron Buxton and Carlos Correa both entered the concussion protocol today after running into each other. They are not on the 7-day IL, so that's something to be clarified, but they do have to be cleared before returning to game action. Walker Buehler of the Red Sox likely to return on Tuesday. Not official yet, but he is starting a bullpen session today on Thursday, and the Red Sox are going to see how he responds to that before deciding whether to activate him. Aaron Savali of the Brewers threw 5 scoreless innings in a AAA rehab start on Wednesday. Could make his next start in the majors, as we kind of discussed with the Brewers. They're dealing with some injuries right now. We'll have to see if when Savali comes up, who maybe gets sent down from the Brewers. Paul Blackburn of the Mets is expected to make 2 more rehab starts before the Mets decide whether to call him up to the majors. Tyler Fitzgerald of the Giants currently rehabbing in AAA. A couple Dodgers news: Teoscar Hernandez and Tommy Edman not returning until next week at the earliest. I know we had discussed them last week as potentially returning soon, but it looks like there's been a little bit of setback with their rehab. And then Blake Snell and Tyler Glasnow, they're both back to throwing, but still there's no firm timetable for their return. Probably be a month before either of them even have a chance of returning to the majors. O'Neal Cruz of the Pirates, he's been out for 4 consecutive games due to back injury. The Pirates still have been pretty hesitant on putting him on the injured list, so we'll see what they decide there. But the fact that he hasn't played in 4 straight games is maybe a little worrying. Ben Joyce of the Angels officially got season-ending surgery on his shoulder. He had been on the injured list, of course, but this kind of is a firm. He's not coming back this season. And obviously, shoulder injuries are things that you never love to see for pitchers, especially for guys like Joyce who rely a lot on velocity. And so that's going to be tough. Of course, it was kind of rough for him already starting the season because the Angels decided to bring Kenley Jansen and more or less tell Joyce that you might be the closer for the future, but you're not the closer now. And now it sucks that he's going to have to go through some pretty extensive injury rehab before coming back to the majors.
Yeah.
Parker Meadows of the Tigers, he might be starting a major league rehab assignment soon. He's been out since spring training, dealing with a nerve-related issue in his arm. He had a little bit of a nice breakout season last year, but unfortunately we haven't been able to see kind of the fruits of that labor this season. Jordan Westberg of the Orioles suffered a setback in his recovery. He's stopped running and is focusing on resting his hamstring, so a little bit unfortunate news there. His old teammate DL Hall, who is now with the Brewers, is starting a rehab assignment, was dealing with a lat injury, probably ends up getting called up to the bullpen when he returns, so it's not really a whole bunch of news there, but just something to note. Max Scherzer of the Blue Jays, that always sounds so weird to say, he felt tightness in his back after his most recent bullpen session, which is very interesting considering that he's coming back from a thumb injury. So this might just be the fact that Max Scherzer is over 40.
He's having old man problems.
Yeah. I would not be surprised if he's feeling back tightness after throwing a bullpen session for the first time in a while. But yeah, we'll see when Scherzer is able to make his return to the majors. Ronald Acuna Jr. finally starting his rehab assignment. Did have a couple nice games in the rookie complex league, but he is now going to be in AAA, likely for the next 1 to 2 weeks, and we'll see when Atlanta is ready to call him up to the majors. Mike Trout of the Angels has not been able to run at full speed. Has started some on-field drills. It sounds like he's able to, bat fine. It's just kind of running is the issue here right now. So we'll see when he's able to make his return. Yu Darvish of the Padres made his first minor league rehab start on Wednesday. Still no official timetable for when he is going to be returning. Matt Vierling of the Tigers is continuing to rehab in AAA, so unsure when he is going to be returning. Justin Martinez, as we mentioned, of the Diamondbacks, he is facing live batters. Could return soon, but again, we said that last week. He didn't return, so we'll see what the Diamondbacks decide to do there. Lane Thomas of the Guardians starting a rehab assignment later this week. Could be called up soon and kind of take over that center field position for Cleveland. As we mentioned, Brandon Woodruff dealing with right ankle tendonitis. He's going to need at least one more rehab start. He was supposed to be slated to start against Minnesota this weekend, but clearly that is no longer happening. Shane McClanahan of the Tampa Bay Rays still feeling discomfort in his left triceps when playing catch from 60 feet. So really unsure when he's coming back, if anytime soon. Michael Kepich of the Dodgers had a successful minor league rehab assignment. It is unsure how much longer he'll need before the Dodgers call him up to add to their pretty loaded bullpen. And then a few day-to-day guys just to monitor. TJ Friedel's dealing with a wrist injury. KETEL Marte is dealing with a hip issue. But both those guys not necessarily going on IL anytime soon. As for some fun transaction news, Dalton Rushing of the Dodgers is getting the call up. Of course, his main position is catcher, so he is not going to be playing every day at catcher because the Dodgers have someone called Will Smith. But he has had some experience at first base in outfield. And the Dodgers made a pretty concerted effort to call him up, considering that they basically DFA'd Austin Barnes. So it feels like they really want to get Rushing's bat in their lineup. And so is he a pickup for you right now in 12 teamers, or you're going to see how the Dodgers use him before deciding what to do there?
Yeah, I mean, definitely not in one catcher leagues. I think two catcher leagues is where he starts to be considered. But I do think that they're going to use him as kind of a more traditional backup catcher, even though he has played some other spots, which is unfortunate for his value. I think a lot of teams, if they have a versatile second catcher, they don't like to start them in the field a lot because then if your catcher gets hurt or something like that, you need to pinch run, then you have to put your pitcher into the lineup. So it doesn't seem like teams are, they're a little reluctant to play, two catchers on the field at the same time. So I think that's going to hurt him. I guess they just felt like he had nothing left to prove in the minors, and he'll be useful playing 2 to 3 times a week.
Yeah, so probably not too much value fantasy-wise, but just keep a track on how the Dodgers are using him. Jordan Lawler of the Diamondbacks finally got the call-up. Has really good power-speed combo, but it's also kind of weird that the Dodgers the Diamondbacks called him up because KETEL Marte and Geraldo Perdomo pretty much have locked down the middle infield spots. He did get into a game on Wednesday. He pinch hit for Marte today, I believe. But I'm not very clear on how Lawler's going to basically play more than like 3 to 4 games in a week. So to me, he's not really a pickup in even like 15 teamers, I think, just because of how inconsistent the playing time is for him. But yeah, what's your opinion on Lawler there?
Yeah, it does seem like he's going to be a 3 to 4 days a week super utility type guy. I mean, Eugenio Suarez has been pretty good at their base too, so it's the whole infield is kind of clogged up, and then Pavin Smith is DHing on the strong side of the platoon at least, and he's been really good too. So I think if you can add him in a 15-teamer and just kind of keep him on your bench and maybe mix him in when when one of your starters gets a day off or is day-to-day or something like that, he should have multi-positional eligibility. So if you want to hold and hope that he'll kind of luck his way into more playing time, or some will open up, I think that's reasonable. But yeah, I don't think you can really pencil him into your lineup every day.
Yeah. Jake Berger of the Rangers, he got demoted for 2 weeks, and then the Rangers called him back up. So I'm not sure if he immediately slots in again as like a top 12 first baseman, like basically where he was drafted earlier this year. But just something to monitor. If he starts going off, maybe pick him up. Some fun news: Zebby Matthews finally getting the call up. He's going to be starting on Sunday. Thank goodness. He's been absolutely destroying in AAA this season. I was actually expecting Festa to get called up again here,
Me too.
but yeah, the Twins actually decided to call up Zebby. Is he a pickup for you? I know he's going against the Brewers. Like, it's not necessarily the hardest lineup. It could be an interesting stream, in my opinion. But I'm kind of unsure whether he's like a pickup for the rest of the season right now. They did purposely demote Simeon's Woods Richardson, so it feels like
Finally.
yeah, it feels like a move that is somewhat permanent.
Yeah.
I don't think they would be bringing up Zebby just to demote him again. So in terms of Bress this season, is he a pickup for you? In what fantasy context?
Yeah, I would slot him below Weathers, but I'm definitely still interested. I have Zebby Matthews in my NA slot in both of my Yahoo leagues. So this is nice. And it's a Sunday start too, which like for head to head is big because you have a clear sense of your matchup and you know if you need to get an extra start or not. So that'll be nice. What I will say is they've been really they've had a pretty short leash with him in AAA. Like I've been checking on his outings because I want him to get promoted, and he's been going 70 pitches, 75 pitches. So I think they were probably trying to control his innings a little bit for the season. So I wouldn't expect a 6 innings quality start from him right away. I think that they're going to baby him a little bit, kind of like they did with Festa. But I do think that he'll be a solid guy. I think he's your kind of classic underappreciated fantasy profile where the ERA isn't great, but the WHIP's pretty good because he doesn't walk anybody. So guys like Aaron Nola, George Kirby, like those type of arms. He's not going to be those guys right away, but a similar profile.
Yeah, and the Twins are very cognizant of third time through the order. So yeah, again, I would not be surprised if he gets pulled. Even like 4.2 innings, or misses out a chance for a win because somehow the third time is coming through, and they just don't want him to face the 1, 2, 3 section of the lineup again.
Yeah, hopefully they at least let him go a little more than Woods Richardson. I mean, I think he's a more talented pitcher, so hopefully they give him
Yes.
that privilege, but we'll see.
Well, the problem with Wood Richardson is that he got to like 90 pitches by the end of the fourth, so
Yeah.
it's like you're not setting him out anyways for that reason.
Yeah, he
Uh,
was. I think they were just waiting for him to get bombed because he was constantly like mediocre, and maybe they
yes.
didn't feel like he had really earned a demotion. And then when the Orioles lit him up yesterday, they're like, "All right, I think it's time." So
Yeah. Exactly. All right. Well, that wraps up for the injury news. A lot of stuff there, obviously, but hopefully some good news for some of your fantasy teams, even with maybe a little bit of the bad news sprinkled in.
yeah,
All right.
yeah. Last thing I want to say on the injuries, sorry, is Dodgers guys. I think they're going to slow play every single injury. So what I mean, generally when people get hurt, I think you should be conservative about how long they're going to be out for, especially if you don't have IL spots. But the Dodgers, they're just so good that they don't seem to have any incentive to bring any players back. So they're just going to be super conservative. And then one person I forgot to put in the rundown, Sawyer Gibson Long went 3 scoreless innings in his most recent rehab start in high A. He's only at 30 pitches and he missed all last year. So it's going to be a little while, but he's a pitcher list sleeper favorite. So just want to put that out there.
Yeah. Another thing about maybe the whole Dalton rushing thing is that currently the outfield is Michael Conforto, Andy Pajes, and James Outman, and yet those guys are like fine, and the Dodgers have no desire to like move on from that outfield right now. So it's going to be tough for Rushing to get minutes there, and especially when Edmund eventually comes back, it's going to be even tougher for Rushing to really get some minutes, more consistently where it makes sense to have him on your fantasy teams.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
All right, we are going to move on to player performances starting on Friday. Patrick, who was the highlight?
Yep. So on Friday the 9th, Justin Wainwright was on our hitter recap for the day. Merrily, Life is But a Dream, which is, of course, a shout out to Jackson Merrill, who recently returned from the IL and has been playing pretty well. I'm going to talk about someone else, though, the Martian, Jason Dominguez. He had a 3-homer game on Friday the 9th. Went 3 for 4 with 3 homers, 3 runs scored, obviously, and 7 RBI. So a huge night for him. Hopefully, you had him in your lineup. I'm sure a couple people left him on the bench because he hasn't been great before this game. But this is this was a great outing. Solo shots in the 3rd and 7th inning, and then a grand slam in the 8th. So that actually made him the youngest player to hit 3 home runs in a game in Yankee history since Joe DiMaggio. back in 1937. So pretty cool, for a super highly touted prospect to make himself a part of Yankees history like that in his rookie year. But overall, from Dominguez, it's been kind of up and down. His line, as we speak right now in the season, is he's hitting 240 with I think around a 760 OPS, which is pretty good. But 5 home runs and 3 steals. So I don't think it's quite what we hoped for from Dominguez. But does this homer binge, does this keep him relevant in 3 outfielder 12 team leagues, or is he still kind of on the outside looking in?
Yeah, I think in 12 teams he's still on the outside looking in. Because I mean, if you take into stock his season line, he had a 3 homer game that got him to 5, which means that he's only at 2 homers for the other part of the season. I guess the one thing that could make him valuable is the fact that the Yankees do actually try to get his bat in the lineup most days, right? Like they've got Trent
It's
Grisham.
getting tough though. It's getting tough.
Yeah, it is because it's still Trent Grisham, Aaron Judge, Cody Bellinger in those 3 outfield spots, and all 3 of those guys are pretty solid. Um, and there's some work they can do in selecting through the DH and giving guys help here and there, giving guys rest days, but it's just hard for me to see him get very consistent playing time for this to work out, unfortunately. So I think in 12 teamers I'm out. In 15 teamers, 5 outfielder leagues where you've got like a deep-ish bench, I could see it working out. 12 teamers where you have a deep-ish bench, yeah, maybe you could keep him on, and if he is starting, has like a good lineup position, maybe you do that as well. But it's hard for me to kind of recommend him as a pickup, just considering just how crowded that Yankees outfield is.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think he's a bench guy, maybe in 12 team 3 outfield leagues. In like a RotoWire online championship where it's 12 teams 5 outfield, he's probably starting most weeks, and if he's not, you're keeping him on the team. But yeah, it's like the Yankees, they have a great problem, right? Assuming Aaron Judge is an everyday player, they have 4 spots for 5 guys who are all playing well: Ben Rice, Paul Goldschmidt, Cody Bellinger, Trent Grisham, and Jason Dominguez. And he's been the one, they give people off days, but he's the one who's sitting the most often just because of how good Ben Rice and Trent Grisham have been. So obviously it's a good problem to have, but it is coming at Dominguez's expense a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that Trent Grisham decides to have a career year, that the year that Dominguez like feels like, oh, I've got a spot kind of locked up in the outfield.
Yeah, I mean, he's still pretty young, so hopefully he can at least get to like 350, 400 plate appearances and kind of, go from there. But yeah, not quite the close to everyday run that people are really expecting from him.
Yeah.
So on the pitching side, on Friday the 9th, the FEDDE Mercurial was the SP roundup from Nick, which of course is a shout out to the complete game shutout from Eric Fedde. I think we kind of know who Eric Fedde is, kind of like a Toby streamer type for most of our leagues. So I'm not going to talk about him. I'm going to talk about Chris Paddack from the Twins. He went against the Giants on the 9th. He threw 7 1/3 innings with 1 earned run, 3 hits, no walks, and 6 strikeouts. Only 9 whiffs, but a 35% CSW and only 83 pitches. So super pitch efficient to get through 7 1/3 there. His four-seamer in this outing actually sat 95, which is about a tick and a half up from the 93.5 we'd seen most of the season. And he executed it really well upstairs against lefties with the changeup down. That's kind of our classic Blake Snell blueprint approach, which is fastballs up, off speed down. His weakness always, though, has been right-handed batters, which is a little bit unusual for a righty. But the Giants were pretty passive against his middle breaking balls, the curveball and slider. He got 7 out of 12 called strikes on the curveball and a 56% CSW on his slider, which are, typically his weakest pitches. So pretty impressive. Nick is not fully bought in. He thinks that he wants to see better four-seamer location to righties. And he did say to take the chance against the Orioles because the Orioles have a lot of lefties, and is hoping that Chris Paddack can get to that reliable Toby status. He did throw, I believe, 7 scoreless today against the Orioles, but it was with pretty diminished velocity. I think he was more so sitting 92, 93. But Paddack has really turned his season around. I unfortunately have only had him for the absolute bomb he put up the opening week against the White Sox, where he gave up 9 runs in 3 innings or 3.1 innings pitched. But in every single start since then, he's given up 3 or fewer earned runs. So has he earned our trust back here as a streamer?
I've watched a lot of Paddock starts. I'm also like kind of notorious for being a little anti Paddock. I just don't think he's necessarily a good pitcher. Also, a little bit of throwback to last week's conversation on pitch mechanics. He's got incredible IVB on his pitch. I think it's like
Mhm.
18, 19 inches or something like that.
Yeah.
But he's got a little bit more of a vertical release. I think it's like 46 degrees or something like that. So it's basically it's that good because of how he releases it. And so
Mhm.
um, he gets away with a lot of curveball called strikes. And he gets away with a lot of curveball strike twos, which kind of annoys the heck out of me, even as a Twins fan, because I'm like, it's incredible that he's getting away with it, and like that batters aren't picking up on the fact that like he really likes that curveball, and he
Mhm.
will use it even in one strike counts to try to steal a called strike. So to me, he gets away with a lot of stuff that just feels lucky. He gives up a lot of hard contact, and I think every time you put Paddock out there, there's just the risk that, like, yeah, he could just give up like 6 earned runs in 4 innings. But he's shown pretty good consistency this season after that first horrible start, to the point where it's like, yeah, if you feel good about it, if it's a good matchup, you could you could stream him. I just wouldn't expect a lot of strikeouts.
No.
I definitely wouldn't expect 7 innings. The fact that he's, despite the fact that he's gone 7 innings the last two starts, it just feels like you're playing with fire when you put him out there, and I just don't think he's even reliable enough to be called a Toby.
Yeah, usually with a streamer, you want someone who has a little bit smaller range of outcomes. Maybe someone like Eric Fetty or like Zach Littell, who they do have outings where they give up 4 or 5 runs. But with Paddock, it feels like it could all go wrong. So I think I'm with you. If I'd seen the 95 sitting 95 today again against the Orioles, 2 starts in a row, that would have had me bought in because he's a guy who he doesn't have a great he has an okay fastball and a good changeup, but for every mile per hour you throw harder, I mean, it just makes a big difference for someone who's a little fringe like this. So he does get Cleveland next week, which I think, you take your shot there if you need a streamer. I wouldn't feel 100% confident. I didn't feel confident enough to include him in my streamers that we're going to talk about later on because I thought there were some better options, but you could do worse. He has, been really consistently strong the last, 8 starts or whatever it's been.
Yeah, the main thing is he's been consistent somehow, like, and I think that's impressive. It's just maybe he doesn't get the innings or the strikeouts that you're kind of hoping, and if you have basically like a limit on starts in a week, I would be very hesitant to use one of those on Chris Paddock.
Yeah, that makes sense. Not the highest upside, despite the recent really strong outings.
Yeah. All right, moving on to Saturday's games, starting with hitters. Thanks to Kevin O'Brien for the Brett It Be article talking about Brett Beatty. But we are not going to talk about Brett Beatty. We're going to talk about another Yankees outfielder. I realize we're actually going to be talking about all the Yankees outfielders for a couple of these. But we have to talk about Aaron Judge. 2 for 5 with 2 homers, 2 runs, and 3 RBI. I just don't think we've really talked about him enough this season because he's been really, really good. And that's maybe a little bit of an understatement too. He's got 15 homers, 41 RBI on the season through pretty much 25% of the season. His slash line's 412, 497, 782, and he's at 3.6 baseball reference WAR already. Uh, Big note on that 412 average. The next closest batter is Freddie Freeman at 362. So he's got a 50-point advantage on in the average race right now. His year-to-date numbers put him at $23 ahead of Shohei Ohtani in a auction context. That's from a guy who only has 3 steals on the season, so he's doing all of that essentially with his other four categories. And of course, that's what you expect from Judge, right? He was drafted pretty much number 2 overall for a reason. Maybe some guys where it felt like he was going to have a better season than Shohei and drafted number 1. In that case, congratulations, it worked out for you so far. But yeah, he's absolutely dominating at the plate. And I was looking at the MVP race right now. Bobby Witt Jr. is actually having a pretty solid season. I think he's got like 15 steals, only has 5 home runs, but again, it's early in the year. Looks like he's well on his way to probably a 30-30 season. But it still feels like Judge is the odds-on favorite to win AL MVP again. Would not be
Oh yeah.
surprised if he finishes as the fantasy MVP on the season as well, even with how good Shohei's been at the plate as well as on the bases. But yeah, just have to give the flowers to Aaron Judge because he is absolutely destroying right now at the plate, and it's really impressive.
Yeah, he had another homer yesterday. He's up to 15. I mean, it's crazy because we always knew how prodigious the power was. But if you think about who Aaron Judge was early in his career, striking out 30+% of the time, to think that he could carry a 400 batting average into the middle of May, I mean, that just shows that he's just grown so much as a player, and he was already a great player to begin with. So it's super impressive. I mean, the way this is pacing, he's going to be the number one pick in drafts next year. And it's not the typical profile of a guy who goes number one. So, I can't really bet against the guy, but I could see it as, he goes one and then he has, a more normal season, right? Where he hits 50 homers and hits 280 instead of, three, whatever. And then he's good, but he doesn't end up being the number one player in fantasy. So it could be we got a long way to go, but it could be an interesting offseason debate between him, Witt and Otani.
Yeah, and the weird thing with Judge too is that like for the kind of earlier part of his career, there was always kind of the injury risk, but he's seemed to shake that a little bit in the last couple seasons. And now I guess the thing that he needs to shake is just being awful in the playoffs. So we'll see how that
Yeah,
works out
that's
for him.
the last I guess the last infinity stone for him, right? He can do everything else. So.
Yeah. All right, moving on to pitchers. Thanks to Nick for the making a Kolek call, as he wrote up article, of course, talking about Stephen Kolek of the Padres, who went to Colorado and went 9 innings, no one runs, 5 hits, 2 walks, and 7 strikeouts, which is insane. I thought about streaming Kolek, but I didn't because of two reasons. One, I actually had never heard of Kolek before, so I was like, I'm not gonna stream a guy who I've literally have no idea who he is, even though he's playing the Rockies. And then, of course, because he's playing the Rockies, I was like, that might be a good stream, but he is in Coors. And so there's a chance that it could all go wrong. But clearly my mistake because he cruised against the Rockies. It wasn't like an elite show of pitching, but he was very good at locating his pitches at the edge of the zone, kind of evidenced by a 29% CSW despite only 9 whiffs on 104 pitches. So a lot of good called strikes there. That being said, he did leave a lot of mistakes over the plate that Rockies just couldn't take care of because they're the Rockies and they're bad. That being said, though, of course, a complete game shutout is pretty much a rarity in baseball nowadays, so you have to celebrate that. Kolek, to me, though, at best, he's a very low-end streamer still. Maybe some win chances because he's got the Padres behind him. But other than that, yeah, I'm not rushing out to grab Kolek in any of my leagues.
No, I think you gotta write it off aside from the softest of matchups where you might need a win. He was a middle reliever last year for the Padres, and now he's throwing complete game shutouts, which is impressive. But yeah, I don't think we can really put too much stock into it. Whether you look at, our PLV metric or pitching, like Stuff Plus, anywhere you look, he just kind of grades out as a slightly below average starter who's like a pitchability lefty. So I don't think there's too much to buy into here. Hopefully he keeps stringing them together, but yeah, I'm not really in.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to the 11th Sunday. On the hitter side, Johnny Gordon was on our hitter recap. Good man vibes only, which is shout out to Hunter Goodman, who's had a really solid season. One of the few Rockies who has been doing well. I'm going to talk about someone who's having kind of a late career resurgence here, and that's George Springer of the Blue Jays. He was 2 for 5 with a double, a home run, 2 runs, and 3 RBI on this day. That was his 5th homer of the season, and Johnny said he's challenging Freddie Freeman to see who's the age 35 fantasy MVP. Obviously, Freeman has a leg up here, but that's also what we expected from Freeman. Whereas Springer really seemed to fall off last year, leading a lot of people to speculate that he just might be cooked. But he's back, kind of showing a season, kind of like he showed in his prime with a really nice power speed blend. He's hitting the ball harder than ever, 50% hard hit rate, getting on base more than ever with a 15% walk rate, which is his career high. And his current slash line sits at 279, 390, 488. And the X stats from Statcast, they seem to indicate that this fast start is earned because it doesn't seem like he's getting lucky or anything like that. Johnny sees all-star potential here, which the way that Springer has been going, I could see. He's got 5 homers and 6 steals already. He seems to have this new approach where he's swinging a lot less. He's making a little bit less contact, but he's being really selective and doing a lot of damage when he is swinging. And it's really paying dividends. He's locked in Toronto as the cleanup hitter. So, is this a real bounce back campaign from Springer or just a hot start?
I want to say it's real. Um, because like things like walk rates and stuff like that, like that's less luck. I feel like that's more skill based, and if he's kind of making a concerted effort to just be a bit more patient at the plate, pick the pitches that he's willing to hit and hit hard. It feels real to me. Um, I was very out on Springer this season. I wanted nothing to do with him. It was like he's old, like he's kind of lost it. But I think the fact that he's has good metrics in and of itself, I think is a good thing. I think the metrics themselves are what back up to me that like this kind of this late career turnaround for him is actually real. And the fact that he's got steals is actually kind of impressive too. Obviously, he's fast. He batted leadoff for the longest time, but the fact that he's doing this, at his age is still pretty impressive.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's pretty much legit except for the batting average. I don't think that it's reasonable to expect him to hit close to 300. He's a 263 career hitter. So I think that somewhere in the 260 to 270 range would be fine. Would be a reasonable expectation, which is, I mean, good considering the league average batting average, whatever it is now, 235. I picked up Springer in a 12 team Yahoo 3 outfield league, and I flipped him for Matthew Liberatore, and I think it's kind of a win-win trade. Libby's been really good. I could probably use the outfield at this point with Hap, Trout, Alvarez all on the IL, but I didn't know that at the time. So I think yeah, he's going to be a solid player this year. So on the pitching side, Sunday's recap from Nick was no more Mr. Bryce guy, which was of course a nod to Bryce Miller's pretty rough outing. We're not going to talk about him because he is on the IL now, but I'm talking about somebody else who had a pretty rough day on Sunday. So following the complete game shutout from Stephen Kolek, of course, the Padres' best pitcher so far, pretty much, at least before this game, Nick Pivetta, suffered some real regression at the hands of the Rockies on Coors Field. He went 4 innings, gave up 6 runs with 7 hits, 2 walks, and 5 strikeouts. He did have 14 whiffs into 30% CSW on 81 pitches, but obviously the results were ugly. It was, a little bit of Coors, having an impact, but like we've said, not really a matchup to fear anymore. It might have hurt Pivetta's fastball shape, not getting quite as much carry as he typically does. Nick notes that his next couple starts come against the Mariners. At least his next one is against the Mariners at home. So, you should feel pretty confident about that just because Petco's a good place to pitch, even if the Mariners are a little bit of a, they're a pretty strong offense at this point, which has been surprising. But Pivetta, he was off to such a hot start. I mean, he was like pushing a below 1 ERA at one point and just looked great. Looked like a great signing for the Padres. His ERA has creeped just above 3. I think it's 3.06 right now, so not bad, but it's regressed pretty hard. And Pivetta has never had an ERA of below 4 in a season. That's a stat that I feel like I've heard a million times in the last month or two, which is crazy, but it just kind of, hints at the ratio risk with a guy like Pivetta. So, with the ERA creeping back up, are we just seeing him inevitably? Is this just another step on the inevitable path to a ERA above 4, or do we think that Pivetta could actually take a step forward here?
Yeah, it's weird looking at his stats from last year and this year and just comparing it and trying to see like what's the main difference. Um, Striker rate's down like 1%, walk rate's up 2%. BABIP is a little bit lower, but not so low that you'd think that he's getting lucky. The main difference is his home run per fly ball rate is just dramatically different. And I'm very curious if that's just because he's now in Petco instead of being in Boston, right? Like, it's kind of nice to not have to deal with being in a park like Fenway in a more basically pitcher friendly park like Petco. The strikeout rates are very similar. Like his swinging strike rate's like up 1%, but that just feels like a little bit of noise to me. Not anything that like he's, you know, so much different than the pitcher he was last year. Yeah, I don't know. I think for me, the expected stats kind of speak to the fact that like, yeah, his ERA is probably not like the ones, but it also probably isn't 4. And the whip being low is maybe a little suspect. He's like you mentioned, it's like a 1.6 or oh 06 or 1.05 whip. That's not that's pretty low. But then again, last year he finished with the 1.13 whip. So I think all of that hemming and hawing to say, I think this version of Pivetta might be actually the version we get. like a low to mid threes ERA actually feels attainable for him. And I think part of that is just like having, probably around half his starts in a much more friendly park for him um, than where he's been for the past couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I do believe in Pivetta a little bit more than years past, and I think most of it is the venue change. Like you said, he's not a different really pitcher this year. But Fenway, people think it's bad for home runs. It's not really that bad for home runs. It's just bad for runs overall.
Yes.
There's just a lot of high scoring games played there. So I think that the change of park is gonna make the difference. Him going from a 4.2 ERA to a 3.6, 3.7 ERA guy. So I think I see him more in the mid threes than the low threes, but I think that most of the value is going to come from, wins, strikeouts, whip, things like that. So I think that he's kind of locked in as a guy you start every matchup, except maybe against the Dodgers or something like that. He does have to pitch in a really tough division, right? So that's gonna be a challenge for him. But I do think that the venue change is gonna allow him to kind of reach a new level.
Yeah, just looking at his, two main pitches, the four seamer and the sweep were, not a whole lot there that screams like, oh, it's really different. Like his four seamer's got a little bit higher of a swing strike rate this year, but it's pretty much the same exact CSW. The sweeper's probably been overperforming, got a much higher called strike rate this year, 15% compared to 10% last year. So maybe that goes down a little bit, but again, like he's not necessarily throwing the sweeper for called strikes anyways. So um, is he maybe getting a little bit of luck on the sweeper? Maybe, but at the same time, like it's also a 10% increase in his zone rate, so maybe he is trying to steal a bit more strikes or called strikes with that pitch. Either way, I think his approach is pretty much the same as it was the past couple seasons, and I think being in San Diego is just really helping him out.
Yeah, and I think he's figured something out from a control perspective. The last couple of years, it seemed like as a prospect and as a young pitcher, that was kind of a detriment for him. And he's become a pretty good, I think, even above league average pitcher in terms of free passes and things like that.
Yeah, the one thing I will say is that Pivetta looked great in the first half of last season as well, and then he absolutely came down to earth.
Yeah,
He's not old; he's only 32 years old, but again, I would not be surprised to see some maybe second half regression for Pivetta, just because that's kind of normal for him.
hmm
Uh, and yeah, I think just be aware of what he looks like in maybe the beginning of July around the All Star break, and if it's still like kind of solid, then I think you can keep holding. If it's starting to look a little shaky, then maybe that's when you try to trade and jump ship.
yeah, I agree.
All right, moving on to Monday. Thanks to Christian Ottoman for the Touch of Galay hitter recap article talking about Gleyber Torres of the Tigers. But we are going to talk about another Yankees outfielder. They've just been having a really good week this week. Trent Grisham, 3 for 6 with 2 home runs, 2 runs, and 2 RBI. As we kind of mentioned earlier, he's having a little bit of a career resurgence in the Bronx. He's got 12 homers on the season. Now, after this game on Monday, which I think, at least at the time on Monday, was like good for third in the majors. It's probably changed a little bit since then. He's batting 283. He's got an impressive 628 slugging percentage. He's managed to cut down his strikeout rate from 27% to 20%. This is especially important considering that he's finished the last 3 seasons under the Mendoza line in terms of average. So a 283 average is actually kind of insane coming from Trent Grisham. And that has all parlayed into becoming the leadoff hitter for the Yankees. He's been in that role pretty much for the last 2 weeks. So with that understanding, right, he's having a really good year, having a very different average than what he's hitting previously. Is he reaching must roster territory right now? He's 40% rostered in both Yahoo and ESPN. So, he's available in over half of the leagues that are on those sites. Do you think he's a guy that is at this point a must pick up in a 3 outfielder situation?
Yeah, I think unless your outfield's stacked, he's a guy who you should add if he's available. I mean, I don't imagine there's a lot of places where he is that are active leagues, but if he is, I think go for it. It feels similar to the Javi Baez conversation last week, generally in terms of guys who have been absolutely terrible for a couple of years and now they're playing really well. But the difference here is that Grisham actually seems to have made more substantive changes than Javi Baez. Grisham has actually gotten more aggressive, which is, something that we don't always like to see, but he's a super passive hitter, kind of in like the Lars Nootbaar type. So when you have a guy who has great plate discipline, but they also let a ton of pitches in the zone go by, they're not going to be able to do damage. And that was kind of what Grisham, he was dealing with. So he's bumped up his swing percentages while still maintaining excellent plate discipline. So the strikeouts have fallen with it and the power has kind of popped. So I think you just let it ride. He's going to be, like you said, the leadoff guy for the Yankees 75% of probably games, and they're the best offense in the league. So I think that as long as he has that role, he should be on your team. I think that the power, obviously at this level, is not legit, but I think that the power is a tool of his. The batting average, even with the reduced strikeouts, I don't think we're going to see. I don't think he'll end the season with a batting average above 260. But I think that he's going to get on base a lot, which is a good leadoff guy skill, and I do think that he's going to keep popping home runs. So yeah, I think you just ride it out, and if he has a crappy week or if he gets bumped out of the leadoff spot, then I think you might want to cut bait. But for now, I think you just go for it.
Yeah, and that's especially valuable for a guy that you're just picking off the waiver wire, right? You didn't put any investment into him,
Mm-hmm.
so if he's great, keep him on your team, and if he's bad, just cut him. All right, moving on to pitchers. Thanks to Nick for the Let's Talk Dollander Season 1 SP Roundup article. Of course, referring to Chase Dollander, the Rockies, who we're going to talk about. He was in Texas on Monday, pitched 6 innings, 2 runs, 1 hit, 3 walks, and 7 strikeouts. Got the loss in this one, unfortunately, because he plays for the Rockies. Yeah, Dollander, again, he's a rookie this season. He's got really nice velocity, like upper 90s. Fastball kind of sits 97. The problem is he just doesn't have any other great pitches. He's got a curveball that comes and goes. It was good on Monday, getting, I think it was like a 65% strike rate, stealing some called strikes here and there. But he's got a slider that he can't really locate all that well. I think he only got five whiffs or something like that, or maybe only 5 strikes, I think, on 12 pitched. So, yeah, it's kind of unfortunate for him because he's part of the Rockies organization, which is not very consistent in terms of pitcher development. I think when he got picked up in the draft, it was 2 seasons ago now. A lot of people were kind of annoyed that he went to Colorado because it was like, this is a guy who doesn't really have great stuff, and now he's going to an organization that really can't even develop the good stuff that he has. So yeah, it seems like the deck is pretty much stacked against him to succeed this season. I think there's some good traits there. Obviously, having a really high velocity fastball is really good. Having some breaking pitches that could end up being really solid with pitches is a good recipe for success as well. But he now gets a really challenging set of opponents coming up with Arizona, Yankees, and the Cubs. So I don't know. To me, he's just kind of bottom of the barrel streaming material, very similar to how we see Kolek, and then I think he's even lower than Kolek because he plays for the Rockies. Any thoughts on Dollander and kind of maybe the pitcher that he could become? Is this a guy who's just kind of cooked because he plays in Colorado, or is there maybe some promise there that he could become like a legitimate big league pitcher in 1 or 2 seasons?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just got to root for him from afar for now. I think he could have a path to being a viable fantasy guy, but I don't think it's this year, and I think you need to see it before you believe in it. If we think about what Rockies pitchers have been fantasy viable outside of, like maybe main event or deeper leagues in the last 10 or 15 years, it's like Ubaldo Jimenez and Herman Marquez at his absolute peak, right? That's pretty much it. That's all I can think of. So it's just a real uphill battle. And the Rockies have no idea what they're doing. Like they have their worst team in the league. And there was an article that came out this week. I can't remember if it was ESPN or The Athletic that said they're the only team in the league that doesn't have a proprietary in-house stuff plus model. So they're just worlds behind everybody. So it just puts their players in a really tough position. So I think yeah, he's a guy who you want to succeed and, root for him, but I don't think you can have him on your team.
Yeah, it's a pretty rough situation out there in Colorado, and it's unfortunate that it's all culminating in what looks to be probably the worst season in Major League Baseball. At least it's shaping up to be that. And even kind of just what you're trying to discuss, it's not just the investment on the field, but it's the investment off the field that is just not happening right now for that franchise. And unfortunately, it's players like Chase that suffer, who have some promise, but unfortunately might not be able to get there because of the organization that they're with.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that takes years to overhaul too. So on Tuesday the 13th, The best performer, or the hitter recap from Scott McDermott was a shout out to the recently returned Dalton Varsho. So Varsho good. He has had, I think, 4 or 5 homers since he came off the IL, so pretty impressive stuff. I'm going to talk about a struggling stud, Matt McClain from the Reds. He just went 1 for 4 with a double on this day, so it wasn't the great game that got him in the hitter recap. Scott just wanted to kind of cover his struggles. He had a great first week, McClain did, where he hit 3 homers, but then he hit the IL with a hamstring strain and really scuffled after returning. He only hit 121 in April and actually has been dropped down to 8th in the lineup by Terry Francona. Time will tell if this is the manager trying to send him a message or something more permanent. But McClain's 31.4% K rate is in the bottom 5% of the league. And obviously a 224 BABIP isn't helping, but the contact struggle or the contact concerns are real. His walk rate at 13.1% has been pretty strong, and he has 10 steals, so that's at least keeping him, from completely dragging down your team. But he does need to start making more contact because that 171 average is kind of dragging you down a good amount. McClain missed all of last year with, I believe it was a shoulder injury that happened in spring training after having a really good rookie half season. So he was drafted, I think, right inside the top 100 in a lot of leagues, some leagues with second base, shortstop, dual eligibility. But I think, some people thought of him as a 5 category contributor and we're drafting him like that. And I'm just wondering, maybe do we have kind of unrealistic expectations here for Matt McClain, just given the struggles we've seen so far?
I mean, I want to say yes because he was out for all of 2024, right? So we were kind of banking on him returning to a 2023 form. And if you're just out of, baseball for an entire year, that's just going to kind of mess with, you know, just being a major league baseball player, right? It's kind of tough to get back into the swing of things there. Um, that being said, I mean, he's 25. Like, there's still some promise here. Like, that 23, the age 23 season, he batted 290, right? So 171 feels very uncharacteristic. His strikeout rate's like up 3%, but that would not be enough to kind of justify a drop of over 100 points in your average. Like you said, the BABIP's kind of low, only 224. But yeah, to me, I don't think he was. I mean, obviously now looking at his stats, he was overdrafted. But I think at the time that he was drafting, I think it made sense where he was going. I probably wouldn't have been as aggressive for a guy who was, out the whole season and didn't necessarily have the track record. But at the same time, like, no one saw this coming. And yeah, I think to the question of, can he be a 5 category contributor? I think we'll see on that. I think playing in Cincinnati helps a lot in being a little bit of a 5 category contributor, especially when you can run the base as well. But maybe this season's just not there. That's going to happen. I do think like you'd want to see a little bit of a turnaround in that average. Maybe he's getting unlucky. Maybe he just isn't making good contact. I mean, looking at our contact metric for PL, it looks like it's okay. He's got, well, actually, I should say, according to the contact metric for PLV, he's actually lower than the 10th percentile. So his contact ability is actually pretty awful this season, which that's maybe a little surprising considering how good his how average his process plus has been. But it looks like, yeah, he, I guess, is struggling to put the bat to ball. And maybe that's an issue with, how he's approaching the plate, things like that. I don't really have a lot of other things to say about that, but yeah, I think he's just taking a little bit of dip. Maybe it's a weird sophomore slump sort of thing. Maybe this season's just not what it's going to be, but I also don't think that means that we need to give up on him long term.
Yeah, I'm not bearish on him long term by any means. I think that his rookie season kind of set an unrealistic expectation. He's a guy who in the minors always had strikeout problems, and he was able to succeed in spite of it because he has a great power speed blend. But like in Double A in 2022, which was his longest minor league stop, he struck out 28% of the time. He walked 15.5% of the time, so it doesn't matter. But it is part of his profile. So I think that the 290 average that he put up in his rookie year was kind of a mirage, just like the 171's a mirage, right? The truth is somewhere in the middle there. But I do think he could benefit from being a little bit more aggressive, like the adjustment we were talking about for Trent Grisham. His zone swing rate's like 55%, which has got to be close to the bottom of the league. So I think he's putting himself in a lot of tough counts. Obviously, it's tough to be more aggressive when you're struggling to make contact, but I think that he could see some benefit from that. The drop in the lineup is going to really hurt him just in terms of a accumulation perspective. But I do think like he might be. We'll see how the season ends. Right, we're a quarter of the way through, but he could be a great post hype bounce back next year. I do think his future is kind of as a 4 category contributor and like a slight plus in batting average. I do think he's more of a 250 type guy.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of just back up what you were talking about, just looking at his POV metrics, his swing aggression is below 10th percentile. So
Hmm.
clearly he's just not aggressive at pitches that he should be hitting. But then the weird thing is that his decision value, he's like actually above MLB average. Right now it's sitting at around maybe the 60th percentile, but his season average is above the 75th percentile. So he's like making good decisions at the plate, which I think is evidenced by that 13% walk rate. But then he's just not swinging at pitches that he should be swinging at, and instead maybe is trying to, maybe he's trying to get on base more than he is trying to kind of, damage the ball, which is an interesting trade off to make. I think the 302 slugging is a pretty interesting number compared to the 296 OBP. Like he's just not getting any extra base hits right now.
Yeah, yeah. I think that he makes good swing decisions in terms of chase, but I think it's coming back to bite him in terms of letting, like you said, letting a lot of pitches in the zone go by. So hopefully, the pendulum swings back the other way a little bit, and he's able to start doing a little bit more damage.
Yeah.
On the pitching side, on Tuesday, the SP roundup was LA conditional, which was honoring Logan Allen's strong outing. I think that he's still off our radars in shallower leagues, so I'm not going to talk about him. I'm going to talk about Spencer Schwellenbach. He got the win against the Nationals. Went 7 innings, 2 earned runs, 4 hits, 2 walks, only 3 strikeouts, 11 whiffs and a 29% CSW and 97 pitches. His first pitch of the game was a fastball up and out of the zone that was hit for a home run by CJ Abrams. So tough way to start, but he really kind of settled in and cruised after that. His slider, splitter, and cutter did some good work. Nick was really happy with what he saw from Schwellenbach. He's got a super deep, 6-pitch arsenal and just completely attacks guys with it and was able to eat up 7 innings here, even if it wasn't with great strikeouts. But on the season so far, he's 2-3. He's throwing 54 in the 3rd innings, 46 strikeouts, 3.31 ERA, and a 107 WHIP. So he's been, you probably paid around maybe pick 70 or 80, or maybe like pick 100 if you drafted early. But he's been a great return so far. So I'm wondering if he earns that ace is going to ace tag that Nick hands out, at some point this year or by the end of the year. I think right now he's 17th on the list and the top 13 guys have the tag. So he's kind of right on the fringe. So, what do we think? Do we think that could Schwellenbach could earn that title?
I think the challenge for him is the strikeouts are down, right?
Yeah.
Only a 20% strikeout rates. The control's clearly there, right? Only a 5% walk rates. Whips very good at 1.07. I think what's holding him back from, being that true ace is just getting that strikeout rate up. But the weird thing is that his swinging strike rates are actually really good. 80th percentile, 15% swinging strike rate. It is kind of weird that he hasn't been able to basically finish his strikeouts or finish his counts with a strikeout. So maybe that's just being a young pitcher. And he's only 24. I think if I was going to bet, I'd say that he gets the tag at some point. But I think you would need to see that strikeout rate go up and for that swinging strike rate to get realized on strike 3, rather than just kind of get into 2 strike counts and then not being able to finish out the at bat.
Yeah, I don't think Schwellenbach's ever going to be a huge K guy, but I do think that he's more of a strikeout and inning guy than what we've seen 7.5 strikeouts per 9 so far. So yeah, I've been really happy with him. I think he's got a shot. I don't feel super confident, like 100% confident that he's gonna earn the tag, but I do think that the strikeouts will bounce back a little bit. He only has 2 wins, which is kind of frustrating. So I think if you have someone who is like open to trading him for like a back end top 100 type player, I would jump at the opportunity. But yeah, I have him and Chris Sale in a league. I think they were my first 2 pitchers drafted, and I wasn't expecting to have a hard time getting wins from those guys, but that's the way it's been so far. So wins, they're very fickle.
Yeah. It is interesting that he's a little bit of a ground ball pitcher. He's got a 51% ground ball rate this year. And he's getting a lot of ground balls on his slider, which is not necessarily a pitch I
Huh.
would consider a ground ball pitch, but 60% ground ball rate on a slider that he pitches 20% of the time. So,
Yeah, that is weird.
he is kind of maybe giving up some, uh, not saying he's pitching to contact, but he's kind of maybe allowing his pitches to, kind of finish in ground outs than necessarily trying to get strikeouts. But again, that slider's got a zone rate of 40%, so it seems weird that it's got that high of a ground ball rate.
Yeah, I guess it's not nasty enough, I guess, to just rack up the swing and misses like some guys' sliders.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to Wednesday. Thanks to Kyle Stansel for a great title, "The Lord of the Swings," the two Stowers. Love that. Of course, referring to Kyle Stowers, who's having a pretty solid year in Miami. But we are going to talk about Ketel Marte of the Diamondbacks. 2 for 4 with 2 homers, 2 runs, and 3 RBI. He's made a pretty nice return from the injured list in 12 games. So far, he's hit 5 homers. He's got 8 runs and 7 RBI. The batting average, unfortunately, is at 205. But probably expect that to turn around. He's got a 111 BABIP in those 12 games. So that's shockingly low. I would expect that to go up. Again, very small sample size of 12 games. And yet, in those 12 games, he's got a 15.6% strikeout rate, 13.3% walk rate. So the numbers all around, pretty solid. Just the average is really horrible right now. Ketel Marte, clearly great season last year. Probably the best season of his career. He might have. Who knows? And I think he was getting drafted basically as the top second baseman. Depending on whether Mookie Betts had second base eligibility in your league or not. And he's very firmly a 4-category guy, right? He does not get steals, but should at least have a good enough average. And in that very high-powered Arizona offense, is going to get runs, RBIs, and clearly is on the way to hitting a bunch of homers as well. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year he finishes as a top 3 second baseman, even though he's missed a whole month of games, just with how much he's racking up some of these counting stats in this 12-game sample size. That average is still pretty low, which is kind of surprising given how low that strikeout rate is. But yeah, any thoughts on Ketel Marte and kind of what the rest of his season looks like? Do you feel like he is going to kind of continue the trajectory that he started last year, or is it still maybe pump the brakes and don't expect that type of production?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be unreasonable to expect a complete repeat of last year, but I do think he's capable of like 90% of that production. I actually ended up with him on 2 out of my 3 teams, which wasn't really planned. He wasn't a target necessarily. That's just kind of where I found myself. So obviously the IL stint was disappointing, but he seems to hopefully be past it. I just need him to stay on the field, really. I think that, yeah, he has a super high floor. I mean, he's got some pop, great offense. He's hitting in a prime lineup spot, every single day. So I think that he's got a good chance to finish top 3 at second base, like you said. I mean, we've seen second base might be the worst position. We've seen like Jose Altuve and Marcus Semien, who are back half of top 100 guys, just completely crater. I'm looking at like the top ranked second baseman right now, besides Mookie Betts. It's Jorge Polanco, Jonathan Aranda, Bryce Terang, Michael Garcia. Like, he's going to be ahead of all those guys by the end of the season. Maybe Michael Garcia will keep it up and go on a crazy power speed run, but I think that he's got a chance to finish as the second ranked second baseman behind Mookie, which, for where you drafted him, you definitely take.
Yeah, right now all those names that you mentioned all have very severe detriments in multiple categories, and so if Marte can be at least consistent in 3 categories, I think that would really help him kind of retain that status. Obviously, missing a whole month of games isn't great, but he's just going to just in terms of just pure counting stats, I think he's still going to overtake those guys that you mentioned.
Yeah. Oh, and Ozzy Albies too. That's one that I forgot to mention, and Matt McClain.
Yes.
So, I mean, if you tried to take a good, not great second baseman, it hasn't worked out so far, unfortunately.
No, it has not. All right, moving on to pitchers. Thanks to Nick for the All Smiles Davis SP Roundup article talking about Davis Martin of the Chicago White Sox. But we're going to talk about Eric Fedde, who we already kind of briefly mentioned earlier in the pod. He was up in Philadelphia, got a no decision, 5.2 innings, no earned runs, 3 hits, 4 walks, and 3 strikeouts. Again, I'm kind of mentioning Eric only because he, as I mentioned, had a complete game shutout on Friday against the Nationals, struck out eight batters in that one. And then follow that up with a start here, where he also went 5.2 strikeout innings. Unfortunately, it was a little bit messier. 4 walks, only 3 strikeouts. Couldn't even get the quality start, and did not get the win either. And yeah, this game was pretty much marked by ineffective pitches. I think those 4 walks really tell the story of kind of who Eric Fedde probably really is. He still managed to walk away with a shutout performance, which is just sometimes how the cookie crumbles in baseball. That being said, Eric Fedde to me is just not really a pickup. He gets Detroit and Arizona next, 2 very good offenses. To me, that is not a guy that I want to be trotting out against either of those. For you, where do you think Fedde kind of fits in a fantasy context? Is he a guy that, you hold on your roster and start, for games except against the hard offenses, or is he just firmly on the waiver wire and you pick him up for a stream here and there?
Yeah, I mean, I think somebody in your league's gonna add him just because of all the zeros he's been stringing together, but I don't think it should be you. I mean, I think if it's a super easy stream, go for it. But like you said, the next couple of matchups are not that. If it was last year's Eric Fedde, I think that would be a different story. I mean, he was a rock last year, and he's regressed under the hood this year, not necessarily on the surface. So he has a 3.44 ERA versus 3.3 last year. He has regressed in WHIP 1.3 versus 1.16, but his strikeout to walk strikeout minus walk last year was 14%, which is like, I think around league average, maybe slightly above for a starter. And now it's 3.2%. So clearly he's a deceptive guy. So he might be getting away with a little bit, but I think that he's just benefiting from some luck and some smoke and mirrors here. So these are the kind of guys who I never pick up, and it drives me crazy when they do well, but I trust my pitching process. So I think I'm just going to stay away.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, like Fedde was great for the White Sox. I know he was crushing against the Twins for a couple starts, and when they finally traded him out of the division, I was pretty happy. And then I think his first game with the Cardinals, I think he faced the Twins, which was kind of hilarious. But he did regress in St. Louis last season. He was great in Chicago, and then just wasn't that great with the Cardinals. And this year, the start of the season was kind of rough for Fedde. So the fact that he's been able to string in 2 good performances is pretty impressive, but yeah, to me, he's just not a guy that's worth picking up in pretty much any context. Maybe an NL only deep league, but even then, like that's like a hesitate and start with caution sort of move.
Yeah, I think he has his utility in deeper leagues, 15 team and NL only. But yeah, the numbers he's put up so far, 3.44 ERA, 1.3 WHIP in shallower leagues, that's not a plus for your team. Really, that's kind of a neutral or maybe a small negative. So
yeah. All right, that wraps it up for the player performances. Obviously, a lot of interesting guys there, some good, some bad, but hopefully some guys for you to keep an eye on as the season goes on. But we are going to move into streamers for next week. Just a recap of who we picked up last week. I picked up a couple of these guys. They were pretty sick. Michael Wacha, great first start, 6.1 innings, 2 earned runs, 1.58 WHIP, 3 strikeouts with a win. Jameson Taillon got a loss here, but it was in 6 innings, 3 earned runs, so still got the quality start there. 0.67 WHIP and 7 strikeouts. So even with the loss, I think that's pretty good. Colin Rea in his first start of a 2-start week, 6.2 innings, got a win, 2 earned runs, 1.2 WHIP, 4 strikeouts. I had him in one of my fantasy teams. Pretty happy about that start. Nick Martinez, who I did not feel safe about, but wow, he actually did something good. Got a win, 7 innings, no earned runs, 0.29 WHIP, only 3 strikeouts. But I think if you get more than 2 from Nick Martinez, you'll be pretty happy about that. And then Ben Lively, unfortunately, he got on the injured list with a flexor strain, but he had 3 scoreless innings with 1 strikeout, so was on his way to like a pretty decent start, but unfortunately got hit with injury. But yeah, honestly, I kind of chalked that up as the 5 wins
yeah.
for streamers. So yeah, nice job picking those last week.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely my best week so far. I mean, the matchups were, it was the best landscape to pick from, but yeah, it's nice to see that they pretty much all came through. We'll see how the second starts go for Rea and Wacha, but they're pretty easy matchups. Rea's White Sox, I forget who Wacha gets, but I don't think it's that tough. But yeah, not quite as good options this week, but still some pretty strong ones. We got a trio of Cubs to kick it off. I've just been looking at their schedule and trying to get as many Cubs arms as I can, just because it's a whole lot of easy matchups after they had kind of a gauntlet in April. So first one is Jameson Taillon, who we obviously just talked about because we talked about him last week. He just got Miami at home. He's going to Miami on the road next week. And then he gets a 2-start home week Colorado, and Cincinnati. So that's kind of the best 4-star run you could really dream of. He's 35% Yahoo, 16% ESPN, and 100% on my teams. I actually traded for him last week because I wanted him. So yeah, I'm big on that one, obviously, as you should be. I mean, easy matchups. Ben Brown, also in the Cubs, next one, 25% Yahoo, 8% ESPN. He gets a two start road week, one at Miami, like Tyone, and then at Cincinnati. At Cincinnati, a little risky, but it's not considered a tough matchup because the Reds lineup has been pretty bad. Um, he is more of a strikeout upside play with some ratio risk. He's a 2-pitch guy, so he gives up a lot of hard contact. So I think it'll still be a good week for him, but he's not quite as safe of an option compared to Tyone. The other one is Cade Horton. That's the third and final Cub. 22% Yahoo, 7% ESPN. He debuted last week as a follower and threw 4 innings and I think about 75 pitches. He's actually pitching against the White Sox this week, which is great. And then he gets at Miami for the week that we're talking about, and then potentially home against Colorado the next week. So another multi-week hold kind of guy. I would just say against the White Sox, make sure he gets close to a full workload because he only covered 4 innings, like I said last time out. So probably a better wins league than quality starts play. And then the last two, a little bit riskier, a little bit deeper leagues, but I still like them. Will Warren, 16% Yahoo, 5% ESPN. He gets a 2-start, which is at home against Texas and at Colorado. 2 matchups that we might have been scared of in the past, but definitely great on the easier side so far this year. And Warren's on a really nice run right now. He has a 16-2 strikeout to walk ratio with 3 earned runs in his last 2 starts over 12 and a third. So he has a really nice fastball that plays well up in the zone that Nick's been talking about. So I think that that's a good target. His season long ratios are kind of mediocre, so he might still be hanging out there. I will say that the Yankees are currently using a 4-man rotation, and they do need to insert a 5th starter at some point. So this could get moved around, but that's what he lines up for now. And then lastly, Landon Roop is 13% Yahoo and 5% ESPN. He only gets 1 start, but it's on the road against the Nationals, who's one of the league's weakest offenses. His service level stats are ugly so far with a 4.95 ERA and a 1.5 whip, but he has a 15.7% strikeout to walk or strikeout minus walk percentage, which is above average. And he's a better wins league target. He's only gone 6 innings twice so far this year. So he's definitely the last option because I feel pretty good about the first 4, but yeah, I think they're all good to go for if they're out there.
Yeah, I think Tyone should be a must roster, at least for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And he's shown promise in the past. Like, he's a solid pitcher. I think at this point he's a little bit more of a, waiver wire or back of your fantasy rotations sort of guy. But I think just with this slate of games, it makes no sense that he should be not rostered for all of those. Will Warren, I think another big thing for him is that if you're in a wins league, he's a really good pickup.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the Yankees are just going to give him so much run support, so it works out in his favor. And then for Roop, I had him on a couple fantasy teams. I finally dropped him in my home league because it was a quality start league.
Yeah.
And the ratios just like were killing me.
Mm-hmm.
And he just wasn't offering too much there. But I think in wins league, he's got some promise. Obviously, the Giants, like, yes, they did just get swept by the Twins, but they're generally a pretty good team. And I did watch the game actually that Roop pitched against the Twins, and I mean nothing from it necessarily stood out. I think maybe the control wasn't great there. I think evidenced by that 1.5 whip.
Mm-hmm.
Does give up a little bit of hard contact here and there, but at the same time, like he's been a solid pitcher. The Giants have no reason to send him down to AAA, and it just doesn't make sense for some league context. But I think for certain league contexts, especially wins leagues, and you're able to kind of tank maybe the ratios that aren't that great. And a good matchup here against the Nationals, obviously, it's a pretty good pickup.
Yeah, he's a sleeper arm I was interested in. I don't have him anywhere right now, but if he, I'm keeping an eye on him where he gets dropped. But yeah, Tyone, great, great kind of consistent option. He got bombed against the Mets a couple weeks ago and it got dropped in some leagues, which I think was just, I mean, maybe if you're not a forward-looking manager, you just rage drop him because he had a bad outing, but created a great opportunity to go scoop him and hopefully enjoy a really strong run here. Didn't get the win this first time against the Marlins, but hopefully he starts racking them up.
Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps it up for streamer recommendations. Clearly, we're on a pretty good hot streak here, so I think all these are going to work out, obviously, because that's how streaming works. But anyways, that is going to wrap it up for the podcast. Again, you can find us on This Week PL on Twitter. Send us your comments and questions at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. Or on the Discord as well. We do have a podcast mailbags channel if you want to ask any questions there. You can find myself on Twitter at the John Kuh. You can find Patrick at pfitzgerald_99. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the Pitcherless podcast feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever else you listen to your podcasts, and leave us a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. Lastly, sign up for Pitcherless Pro. By doing so, again, you could join us in the Discord, get advice from all the fantasy experts and writers over there. There's baseball conversation pretty much the entire day, so if you got nothing to do, definitely come on the Discord and check out what's going on there. That is all for this week. We will be back next week with another episode of This Week in Fantasy Baseball. For Patrick, I'm John, and we'll see you in the next one. Later, everyone.